A hail of urgency exploded across every comms channel on Varroa's 7. Emergency alert. In orbit, human warships sighted. Alien fleets are pulling back. Initially, nobody could accept it. The invaders were all but declaring victory. Then came confirmation of the sighting, and the battlefield started to shift. For millennia, the galaxy was ruled by the great alien empires, stretching over hundreds of star systems. These empires laid claim to realms of untold wealth and might. Most notable was the Derek's Dominion, a technologically superior race known for its military precision, fleets characterized by the most brutal annihilation of lesser races. Under their dominion, innumerable civilizations offered tribute in materials and labor, all feeding the Dominion's war machine. Their fleets imposed order with brutal efficiency, crushing all signs of resistance. Humanity, spread out in the far reaches of known space, had never been central player. Following the string of early interstellar skirmishes on Earth, the planet felt itself becoming ever more overshadowed by alien powers that were millennia ahead of it in terms of technological, shipbuilding, and cosmic alliances. Humans took a long time to survive. One by one, the outer colonies of the planets surrendered to alien protection, which amounted to little more than subjugation. There were a few pockets of free human worlds still in existence, making all the alliances they could to survive, but overall, the galaxy viewed humans as a species doomed to die. Varroa's 7 was the last significant bastion of humanity, an ancient colonial world that had kept itself independent through a combination of shrewd diplomacy and its distance to a relatively dangerous warp route. That warp route dissuaded numerous invading fleets, until the Derek's Dominion recently optimized gravitational stabilizers, clearing the way to Varroa's 7. When it was finally discovered, the planet proved to be at an ideal strategic location, making it a primary target. Derek's admirals anticipated an effortless victory. The last remnant of the Human Defense League, HDL, rallied on Varroa's 7, bracing for the coming onslaught. The planet's surface was studded with old orbital cannons, obsolete missile silos, and shield generators that had not been renewed in generations. The local militia was courageous but ill-armed. If the Dominion's bulk fleet were to show up, no one thought Varroa's 7 could last longer than a few days. In the dusty war bunker called Echo Redoubt, Commander Elaine Grant coordinated the planet's defenses. A woman, in her late 40s with sharp green eyes and short-cropped hair, she had fought and lost more battles than she wanted to remember. As she scrolled through data on a flickering holo display, she continued reading that the Dominion's battle group was coming. The scale of the enemy was staggering. Carriers the size of small moons, frigates bristling with kinetic plasma turrets, and dreadnoughts said to possess planet-cracking weapons. Everything in her told her they were doomed if they met this armada in a head-on fight. Varroa's 7 was inevitably doomed if they did. Commander Grant, however, would not give in. "We will make them pay for every meter of ground," she told her beleaguered officers. Morale was low, but in quiet, gilded corners of the bunkers, some voices shared an improbable rumor that the HDL's secret project was almost complete. A new warship, the world's first genuinely modern dreadnought, may be on its way to rescue them. But many found it hard to accept that rumor. Humanity had not launched a capital ship in decades, due to the lack of resources needed for the massive construction yards. The very idea of a hidden shipyard seemed a desperate rumor, the last gasp of hope. At the same time, Dominion news channels churned out daily messages mocking the idea that humans would ever able to pose any meaningful resistance. Arvin Voss, Derek's fleet supreme commander, had often gone on about humankind, calling them critters scurrying beneath the cosmic boot sole to be crushed underfoot. The dire situation came home as Dominion scouts jumped into orbit around Varroa's 7. These lithe corvettes skimmed the surface of the planet, taking sensor sweeps of every defensive grid. Commander Grant scrambled what few fighter squadrons she had left, but all they could do was toy with the alien ships, who picked them off with advanced beam weaponry. When they were done, the corvettes disappeared in their own faster-than-light jumps, and presumably reported everything they'd seen back to the main Dominion armada. No one questioned the next step, a total invasion. The Dominion's typical modus operandi was to show up in overwhelming force, demand unconditional surrender, and should they be refused, turn orbital defenses into cinders. On Varroa's 7, civilians readied themselves for their efforts to escape, as only a limited number of starliners awaited them. Some prayed for a miracle, others for a swift end, if it came to the worst. Commander Grant did her best to remain calm, maintaining the illusion of a plan, when all she had was the faintest flicker of hope. Elsewhere, in a hidden shipyard within a nebula somewhere across the galaxy, final checks were being called up on the HSS Aegis Ascendant, allegedly the most advanced warship ever constructed by the hands of humanity. Little known, even to the remaining members of the Human Defense League, it had been financed in absolute secrecy by the sporadically active rogue elements of the organization. Futuristic technologies adapted from centuries of secretive research were thrown together into a single dreadnought. If the Aegis Ascendant could launch and fight its way free all the way to Varroa's 7, the balance might finally tip. But the stakes were enormous. The Dominion possessed spy networks and infiltration units that could attack the ship before it got there. Moreover, the Aegis Ascendant's drive systems were unproven. But the ship's commanding officer, Captain Orion Savriel, believed in the cause above all. Tall and quiet, but driven. In years gone by, he had been selected for his tactical brilliance in those wars when small Terran battle groups outplayed more powerful alien armadas. Derek's Dominion had experience, Terrans had craft. That was the premise of their staying power. If pure muscle was not an option, then maybe guile and sophisticated but erratic machines could turn the page. With the Dominion armada looming over Varroa's 7, their security quivered. Admiral Voss, the second-in-command of Supreme Commander Arvin Voss, had devised a plan to initiate the conquest by annihilating the orbital defenses. "There's no reason to be subtle," he advised his staff. "We wiped the last bastion so utterly that no other usurper species so much as contemplates defiance." Dominion warships winked in system. The blockade they formed dwarfed anything humanity could field. Echo Redoubt watched Commander Grant as the sensor screens filled with red icons that marked every capital ship or squadron of destroyers. It was so large it was threatening to paralyze her. But she steeled herself and gave orders. "All defense systems, power up. Prepare to fire at will." What she didn't predict was the sudden hush that descended across the warbling alien communications. Moments before Dominion's final push, a coded alert raced through their ranks. "New contact in system. Massive capital ship type. Unknown design, though transponder." Broadcast matched human channels. Confusion reigned. The strategic net of the Dominion tagged it a warship of no known Terran design, and the energy output registered greater than that of a standard dreadnought. "Ma'am," the comm officer, Commander Grant, called from the bridge. "We have a priority signal from the Aegis Ascendant. They say they're here to help." Grant's heart hammered. Was it truly real? She had prayed for some indication that the rumored super dreadnought was real. Now the system's sensors had confirmed it. Still, the question remained. Could a single ship, however advanced, possibly stand up to the Dominion's enormous fleet? Yet hope fluttered on the surface of the planet. Civilians looked up to the sky. Defensive gunners tightened their grips on their controls. If the Aegis Ascendant managed to punch a hole in the Dominion's blockade, or even drive them back, there was a chance Varroa's 7 could survive. And then, the unimaginable began to happen. In the confusion of the Dominion's data chatter, a whisper passed over alien channels that ships were already falling back from the outer ring. The new human warship was the cause, as if the sight of the thing had both confused and terrified them. As Commander Grant heard in utter disbelief, several Dominion captains indicated they were breaking off their attack vectors. The final push was stalled. Within moments, a system-wide announcement from the Aegis Ascendant announced the arrival of humanity's response to centuries of oppression. The stage was set. The question now was how the Dominion would respond, and if the rumors of alien fleets retreating were a momentary hesitation or a sign of something more profound. The chaos played out on the tactical holo display through her command seat on the Aegis Ascendant as Captain Savriel watched. Swarm after swarm of Dominion ships, previously set to obliterate Varroa's 7, now drift haphazardly throughout the system in the form of disorderly clumps. Dominion admirals buzzed frantic signals down lines of communications. Some wanted to pursue with the attack, others froze, rattled by the Aegis Ascendant's unanticipated arrival and mind-whirling energy readings. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Wei, the ship's sensor officer. "We're detecting erratic drive emissions from several Dominion ships. You can see they're breaking formation. Maybe getting ready to exit the system." Savriel permitted himself a bitter smile. "They're rattled. Let's capitalize on that. Helm, take us into high orbit over Varroa's 7. Weapons, prepare to target any ship that tries to interdict us." The thrum of the advanced reactor reverberated through the deck plating. The design of the Aegis Ascendant was like no Terran craft that ever came before it. Its menacing silhouette was marked by slender lines and dark, reflective plating. Modules of gun batteries lined its flanks, and a forward-mounted array housed experimental rail cannons able to fire penetrator slugs at near-relativistic velocities. Combined with a cutting-edge shield matrix reverse-engineered from alien technology, the dreadnought exuded power even the Dominion had never seen from humans. Initially, Dominion High Command on the battleship Krallos rejected the data. A strapping figure with 4 spindly spines jutting from his plated head, Admiral Voss scowled at the holographic displays. "It's only a Terran trick," he self-corrected angrily. "I'm ordering the fleet to regroup and annihilate that warship. Let no one say we fell back from an inferior species." But Dominion's frontline captains had already lost some degree of nerve. They had bled the Aegis Ascendant to read its power spikes. Their scanners informed them that the newcomer's main cannons could theoretically pierce capital ship armor with a single shot. Rumors spread that the dreadnought was equipped with a new kind of warp distortion field, allowing it to evade or deflect conventional weaponry. Fear spread through the ranks. Fear that they would not be able to claim the victory they had assumed was theirs for the taking. Cracks of doubt had widened among the Dominion fleets, where 6 dozen battle destroyers at the edge of the planet's outer orbit simply turned tail and engaged their FTL motors. Another group of cruisers, unsure whether to stay or go, made a defensive ring but did not move forward. Everywhere, the once unified Derek's Dominion juggernaut began to splinter. Back on Varroa's 7, tentative cheers broke out in Commander Grant's bunker. From the surface, multiple alien vessels pulled away from their corridors of incursion. Some hurtled back into deep space. It was something no one had dared imagine, that the threat might actually back down before a shot was fired in anger. But not all of the Dominion captains were so cautious. A spearhead of battle-hungry admirals was formed a small distance from the planet's north pole. They figured if enough ships worked together, the Aegis Ascendant could be outmatched. And thus a fearsome group of Dominion dreadnoughts, carriers, and assault cruisers charged into the mix to confront the Terran warship. Captain Savriel would not allow the initiative to slip away. Tactical, lock the lead dreadnought. Open with railguns fire. The Aegis Ascendant had launched 3 tungsten slugs, the shot preceded by an inaudible thump and a wave of electromagnetic force. They tore through the vacuum in seconds and slammed into the Dominion dreadnought's shields. The first shot overloaded the dreadnought's forward generator, creating a blinding explosion of sparks. The second slug penetrated its hull plating, ripping out a chunk of superstructure. The ship from Dominion rolled and vomited atmosphere and power. From the bridge of the Dominion flagship Krallos, Admiral Voss watched with dismay as one of his prized dreadnoughts staggered from just a handful of Terran shots. Even more disheartening was the panic that was spreading through the Dominion communications net. Among the lesser captains, it was now whispered that the Terrans had found a weapons system they were unable to stop. Morale nosedived. Unyielding, Voss called for a beatdown. "All ships, target all weapons on that warship. Overload their shields." A curtain of multicolored beams lashed out. Plasma torpedoes shot across the vacuum of space. 2 carriers and 4 cruisers were hammering on the Aegis Ascendant's shield bubble. Aboard the Terran dreadnought, the shield monitors flared red and the deck rattled various sections of the ship in convulsive spasms from the almost soft impact. Crewmen leaned against their consoles. Lieutenant Wei's voice rose with alarm. "Shield capacity down to 70%, but holding. The new field modulators are stepping up. Minimal hull damage so far." The bridging arcs of energy licked around them, forcing the Aegis Ascendant to bank hard. Captain Savriel did not break a sweat. "Initiate the warp distort maneuver. Let them see the difference." The warp distortion maneuver, a marvel of design secret to the Terran ship, warped the local space-time around the dreadnought, deflecting incoming projectiles off course. The Dominion's next barrage of plasma torpedoes streaked by the target, 2 misses by far margins. For all their beam lances, even, flickering across empty space, unable to lock onto the Aegis Ascendant's miracles of flickering signature. As the Dominion vessels repositioned, the Terran warship entered into their formation, firing secondary batteries of rapid-fire railguns. Weaker Dominion frigates detonated in the fray. A slug of hypervelocity penetrated the reactor of a carrier and buckled its flight deck. Fire and debris erupted, causing the vessel to drift without power. From Admiral Voss' perspective, an invincible blade had just driven through the center space of his formation. He tried to rally his ships, close ranks, send reinforcements from Sector Gamma, but many of those reinforcements were already missing, having jumped to FTL or pulled back in terror. In the meantime, the swirling chaos planted confusion through the Dominion's lines of command. Captain Savriel, thrust into the thick of it, took advantage of the chaos. The Aegis Ascendant made short micro-jumps around the battlefield, brief localized warp transits that allowed it to blink from behind an enemy vessel. Each jump was an engineering marvel that required huge amounts of power, but it left Dominion captains spinning, unable to even guess where the dreadnought would end up next. Ship after ship lit the star-spattered void with fiery obliteration at Dominion hands. Some were completely smashed, some made partial withdrawals, shattered beyond recognition. Comms chatter rang out frantically seeking an orderly fallback. Admiral Voss himself, under the Krallos, saw his once-feared blockade shrunk to mere scattered pockets. Carlisle Grant watched, stunned, along with her teams, as their Varroa's 7 surface erupted the same way. The planet's underdeveloped orbital defenses had fired no more than a few shots. The tidal wave of alien warships that was meant to crush them had unraveled into mayhem. The mere idea that the rumored Terran dreadnought was not only real, but single-handedly driving entire Dominion squadrons back into retreat. As successful as it was, Captain Savriel knew the fight wasn't over. The Dominion still had a number of capital ships, and anyone would be able to deal more than enough damage to destroy the Aegis Ascendant if it was caught unawares. The Terran dreadnought's shield's matrix was holding, but the hits were battered and would eventually be worn down. A veritable swarm of Dominion cruisers pressed a coordinated attack. Desperate to demonstrate the fallibility of their human quarry, they all locked on to the dreadnought and pounded it with coordinated salvos. The Aegis Ascendant directly absorbed a handful of hits, and the command deck rocked violently. Sparks flew through some hallways, alarms blaring. Even so, the Terran crew executed damage control procedures calmly. Automated drones slapped shut bulkheads, and the forward rail cannons howled in vengeance, silencing the attacking cruisers once and for all. As fell or fled Dominion ships came down, word spread like fire over transdimensional radio channels. Other alien races eavesdropping were taken aback. The Derek's Dominion, an empire whose conquests went on and on, were in full retreat at the hands of a lone Terran warship. View transformed in real time as scenes they could never imagine unfolded. The balance of centuries-old power dynamics was shifting, if only for a moment. Eventually, Admiral Voss resigned himself to the inevitable. With more than half his offensive force either wrecked or FTLing away, it made no sense to keep them in position. He cursed softly, ordering the Krallos to withdraw. If he lingered, the Aegis Ascendant might destroy them or new Terran reinforcements could pop into the system. All remaining ships, retreat to the standoff point. He ordered, every word laced with bitterness. Shocked at the command, but thankful to still be alive, the Dominion crafts engaged, kicking off FTL sequences or opening jump corridors toward friendly space. The blockade surrounding Varroa's 7 melted like the morning fog under a cruel sun. Commander Grant received confirmation that the retreat was system-wide. She looked at all her consoles, and she was in shock at the scale of what just had happened to her. Above it, the Aegis Ascendant loomed, battle-scarred but triumphant. On its bridge, Captain Savriel exhaled a breath he had not realized he had been holding. Those readouts reported a number of minor hull breaches, some strain on her shield generators, but all in all, they had achieved the impossible. They had driven the Derek's dominion to withdraw. The conflict had tried each state-of-the-art system in the dreadnought, and every bit of determination in its crew. Yet as the swirling contrails of retreating Dominion ships faded into FTL signatures, the reality was already becoming clear. Humanity's new weapon had changed the rules. This alien fleet that had been so arrogant of their capability to win within mere moments had suddenly realized they were outclassed. Their withdrawal sent reverberations through the galaxy's power structure. It was then that the Varroa's 7 Defense Council opened an emergency channel to the Aegis Ascendant, their voices full of gratitude and disbelief. "You don't know what this means to us," Commander Grant said, her voice thick with emotion. "Humanity stood against the Dominion just now, and we won. They're actually retreating." But as elation rippled through the bruised defending force, Captain Savriel recognized its import on a deeper level. The Derek's Dominion would not just wipe this humiliation from their minds. Retaliation probably would come, bigger and meaner. But for now, they had a reprieve, and, more crucially, a rallying figure. If the warship's presence alone could make entire fleets turn tail and run, then perhaps humanity was not so doomed to obscurity or oppression. The last recordings from the war crackled with the panicked voices of Dominion captains, hailing the irresistible power of the new Terran warship. In every syllable, one could hear the shock of having encountered an opponent who they could not readily crush. The ancient structure of power in the galaxy shook. For the first time in centuries, the Derek's Dominion had found a true threat in the most unlikely of places, the species they had always derided as too primitive, too outnumbered to make any difference. The silence of the vacuum surrounding Varroa's 7 slowly descended. The authoritative Dominion blockade had broken apart. Here and there drifted the hulks of destroyed cruisers, venting atmosphere and plasma, and pockmarks of debris glimmered in the starlight. The most surprising result of the Derek's armada was the missing planet. Our planet. Our unbroken, standing, fleet-protected human world, our Aegis Ascendant. Through every Terran communication channel, from dark frontier outposts to chipped colony stations, one message caught fire. Alien fleets are retreating. Human warships sighted. And through the diaspora of scattered human worlds, shock and joy and renewed vigor coursed. In fact, even species subjugated by the Dominion paid attention. There were rumors that if the Terrans had developed any technology that might have actually beaten or deterred the Derek's, that meant it would be galactic order reshuffling time. But the full story of how this new Terran dreadnought had changed the course was still being written. Captain Savriel and his senior officers surveyed the damage aboard the Aegis Ascendant. They had held the advanced shield arrays, although the energy distribution nodes were hairline fissured. A few automated repair drones skittered across the hull patching micrometeoroid impacts and charred plating. Despite its wounds, the warship continued to function. "Status, Lieutenant Wei?" Savriel asked in a whisper, staring at the tactical display. "Several of the compartments vented, but we have sealed them. Safety, casualties, injuries, minimal, mostly minor. Weapons are approximately at 80% capacity. We're still prepared to do battle if necessary, Captain." Relief washed over him. It had been a bloody battle, but it could have been much bloodier if the Dominion had thrown its full force at once. The fact that they had hesitated was the opening that the Terrans could exploit. A new transmission came through from the surface. Commander Grant's face materialized on a hollow panel, the lines of stress still etched in her features but softened by relief. "Captain Savriel, we are beyond grateful to you. You coming here saved so many lives down there. If you had not shown up," she stopped, choking back emotion. "We'd be talking right now under a Dominion flag." Savriel nodded. "We're all in this together, part of the same cause. Commander, keep your defenses raised. The Dominion could rethink it or send reinforcements. But for now, you seem to have a reprieve." On the world below, civilians streamed into the streets. Improvised celebrations broke out in cities that prepared for invasion. Families sheltering underground came out to greet the dawn. For the first time in days, the sun had risen upon a free Varroa's 7. Above the primary settlement of White Cliff, skyward telescopes picked up the faint silhouette of the Terran dreadnought in orbit, watching. The image would later become iconic, a sign humanity was not yet broken. Further afield in the cosmos, alien powers rushed to figure out the debacle. How had one Terran ship scared the Dominion's main attacking wave? A species once regarded as technology poor and few in number had undoubtedly overtaken. Rumors ranged from hypertech from dead aliens to mythical resources mined in the ricochet of the unknown. To many, the particulars matter less than the end result. The Dominion backed down. It was, somehow, the humans they had to thank. Back on the Dominion flagship Kralos, Admiral Voss limped into a war room, bruised from the humiliating clash. He gazed at the star map that displayed the path of their flight. Supreme Commander Voss is not going to be happy, he muttered. The Derek's Dominion had a storied history of punishing admirals who failed. Yet he also felt the Empire would be rocked by the knowledge that Terrans had entered a new age of warfare. He wrote up his report, looking for words to justify the retreat. High-caliber, human dreadnoughts with all manner of armaments, rail cannons that could not be countermeasured, warp distortion maneuvers that couldn't be predated. It sounded more like a cautionary legend than an ordinary after-action summary, even to his own eyes. He knew the Empire's next move could very well be an all-out campaign to eradicate the humans before they could consolidate their power completely. And that meant war on a scale not seen in generations. But there was an undercurrent of fear among Dominion leadership. If the Terrans had somehow gotten their hands on one such dreadnought, might they construct more? One single warship was a powerful thing to have. A fleet of them would be disastrous to any empire that had grown complacent. As the Dominion staggered back, the Aegis Ascendant held its position on the perimeter of Varroa's 7, assuring safety in the immediate aftermath. Day 2 of the withdrawal, the planet's receiving planetary commissioned orbital cannon was repaired and local. Militia fighters went out to save survivors of the downed alien ships. Some of the Dominion crews were recovered from deep space after they ejected in escape crafts. The Dominion survivors were shocked to be spared, as it turned out. They had become accustomed to the Empire's usual policy of enslaving or executing prisoners. The Terrans, however, had accepted them under humanitarian protocols. Ironically, word of such mercy spread within Dominion ranks. Instead of bragging about an easy win, they recounted stories of Terrans who fought with implacable determination but treated their foes with at least a modicum of respect. This nuance hung heavy with younger Dominion officers who challenged the Empire's narratives of barbaric humans. On the third day, Captain Savriel called a meeting with his senior staff gathered in Dreadnought's central briefing room. "We have the opportunity to advance on the offense," he added. The Dominion's primary fleet around Varroa's was sizable, but not the whole kingdom. If we stand by pat, they will unleash a second wave. We could advance and hit their forward bases, perhaps force a truce if we can occupy key points. He saw enthusiasm lighten the officers' faces. They were not used to the taste of victory. "But we've got to remember," he went on, "the Dominion has us outnumbered in ships. We can't be everywhere. It's a long shot at best, but all we can hope for is a balance of power that buys humanity breathing room. If that can't be achieved through intimidation alone, we may well have open war." Lieutenant Wayne nodded solemnly. "Understood, sir. But the fact that they ran away from Varroa's 7 is the strongest statement. We shouldn't have to beat them everywhere. Just remind them this result can happen again if they overdo it." Savriel gave a wry half-smile. "Exactly." Stepping into the outer system, the Terran ship noted pockets of Dominion warships flying transponders active for emergency repairs. Those very ships nearest the Aegis Ascendant were quick to warp away on the scanners, not wanting another clash. Each consecutive retreat added to the sense that the invaders had lost their taste for direct confrontation. The intangible aura of fear had become the Terrans' greatest weapon. Meanwhile, at Varroa's 7, commanders Grant and Savriel coordinated. An array of defensive upgrades were proposed on Varroa's 7, including shield upgrades and anti-ship rail turrets. The colony's damaged infrastructure required fixing, but the planet's population discovered a newfound sense of cohesiveness, volunteering in droves. Liberated from the shadow of immediate Dominion oversight, they wanted to aid in permanent safety. News of this sudden change rippled outwards. On the Imperial worlds nearby, governors had to assure locals that the Terran incident was in hand as soldiers returning from the border told tall tales of unstoppable cannon fire and superlinguistic Terran shields. Among the smaller species that the Empire had placed subservient, bursts of rebellion ignited. If humans could drive back a Derek's fleet, then what other worlds might try to follow suit against oppression? That possibility rang alarm bells at Dominion's Central Command. Even Supreme Commander Arvin Voss consulted with top aides. Some of the more vocal demanded a response the likes of which the galaxy would never forget, completely ignoring the risk posed by Terran weaponry. Others urged caution, noting that miscalculating them again could cause even greater humiliations. The Rit, for the first time in centuries, had come up against a realistic question, a foe who could match up and beat the Rit. Day 4. A coded message was received by the Aegis Ascendant from a Dominion diplomatic envoy. But no further destabilizing actions. It also said, hinting at possible negotiations or even a ceasefire. Captain Savriel read it with some amusement. The same Derek's that had seemed so certain of human defeat now sought terms. He politely responded that man's only goal was to defend its worlds, but he clearly stated that whatever aggression they could mount in the future would be met with the exact same response they'd received at Varroas. The Dominion envoy bristled, but state aggression appeared to freeze. The well-oiled war machine ground to a stop to take stock. In effect, the Terrans had secured a strategic victory beyond that of the immediate battlefield. Respect, however grudging, or at least fear from the Empire that had been sufficient for peace, for a time. The orbiter sensors captured all that and more. The final departure of the Dominion route, stripped carriers limping for home, flickering destroyers shoving wild into FDL, dreadnoughts with half their battery arrays absent leaving the system under maneuver. The new era had begun. Where there had been ruination, Varroa's VII skies bore the silhouette of the Aegis Ascendant, a promise that humankind would no longer be hunted. That image, broadcast across the galaxy, most eloquently spoke in response than any official statement. Meanwhile, the unstoppable Derek's Dominion, cowed into retreat by one Terran warship, heralded a new era in interstellar politics. Among Terran enclaves it was called simply, the day we ended the fear. Others began to refer to it as the Ascendant Stand. The resolution raised many unanswered questions. Would the Dominion consolidate forces and stage a heavier offensive? Now, if humanity were to reverse engineer the advanced tech across an entire fleet, could that knock Hawaii out? That immediate crisis was over for now, however. At least one planet remained free, and the once great invaders slunk away before a power they had never imagined. Golden light bathed the horizon of Varroas 7 in the sun's early rays. Individuals stepped out for the first time without the fear of an orbital bombardment. Laughter-filled city squares once patrolled by nervous militias and agricultural communities returned to everyday life. Above them, the shadow of the Aegis Ascendant loomed, a constant reminder that humanity's fortunes had been reversed. Commander Elaine Grant stood atop an armored bunker overlooking White Cliff Valley. Her uniform was stained and wrinkled from too many sleepless nights, but a faint smile was on her lips. "We made it," she whispered to herself. For a brief moment, the burdens of the whole world felt lighter. Gone were the days of preparing for a Dominion armada, at least for now. Near low orbit, Captain Orion Savriel and his crew gathered on the Aegis Ascendant's flight deck to listen to an official address from the Human Defense League. Leaders from scattered colonies congratulated the dreadnought's success on a large holoscreen. They spoke of forming a new coalition, of uniting the might of every free human world to construct more advanced ships and secure strategic locales. And now this victory had kindled a flame of hope that could unite mankind again. Captain Savriel thus replied, with firmness, but humility. "We've shown we can take a stand against the Derek's Dominion, but we've got to be ready for retaliation. This warship isn't going to deter them indefinitely. We need unity and technology sharing and alliances with other species that wish to break free from the Dominion's hold." A wave of conciliation spread among the leaders. Aegis Ascendant was a name feared throughout the sector. Some compared it to legendary vessels in old Earth fiction, the harbinger of a small but indomitable force not to be extinguished under vast empires. The beleaguered Derek's Dominion, meanwhile, scrambled to stifle the fallout. The retreat was dressed up by spin doctors as a tactical realignment. Supreme Commander Arvin Voss was rumored to be infuriated, Dread Admiral Voss reports read with a blend of incredulity and fury. The Empire's unquestioned dominance was suddenly in doubt. Nobody could deny that a whole invasion fleet, ready to conquer, had turned tail and fled before a single human warship. Yet, with crisis came change. Several Dominion officials started to push quietly for diplomatic overtures, believing it the wiser choice to bring the Terrans to heel with trade or treaties than to risk another military debacle. Others called for vengeance, seeking the creation of even more lethal superweapons. The Empire wobbled between pride and pragmatism, unsure of its next step. For the people of Varroa 7 and all liberated human colonies, one word took precedence. Human Warship declared, extraterrestrial renegade armies are evacuating. It was emblazoned on propaganda posters, recited in refugee camps, broadcast on wobbly colonial networks. To a people often overlooked and derided, it was a clarion call. The fear that had hung over them for so long lifted, and was replaced by the certainty that they had both the means and the will to stand firm. Within days, voices newly liberated crackled on subspace channels. Some provided intelligence about weaknesses at Dominion. Others offered up resources to try to duplicate the Aegis Ascendant's technology. Even lesser alien species, who had historically been bullied by the Derricks, reached out in timid fellowship. In brief, the galaxy started to change. Back at the war bunker on Varroa 7, Commander Grant began her own personal log, her voice unflinching. We saw the unstoppable armada come for us, and we saw it turn away. I never thought I'd live to see that day. The crew of the Aegis Ascendant are to thank for our world, our future. And I have a feeling the galaxy has yet to see anything. It would go on to be heard of its ramifications throughout Interstellar article. Where humans used to live in dispersed enclaves and under the constant threat of alien invasion, now they had something very special, a living proof that the old balance of power was not the way. Things had to be. Under the strength of more ships like the Aegis Ascendant, perhaps humanity could find a new era, one in which no race dwelled in fear alone. The Dreadnought's final command circuit around Varroa 7 would soon lead it away into the stars, but wherever the great ship went, it left behind a world renewed in spirit. The Dominion had retreated. Human persistence had prevailed. And while larger challenges definitely remained, the balance of power was shifting. The legions of antiquity faced a newly emboldened Terran force, one they could no longer afford to ignore as weak or irrelevant. For the moment, humanity had the upper hand. And throughout the cosmos, from war-ravaged worlds to enslaved species dreaming of freedom, a heart beat faster. The day was coming when the word human would no longer inspire pity or scorn but respect, and a little fear, maybe.